Good morning, or good afternoon, or even good evening, depending upon where you're joining us from. And welcome to the Intelligent Community Forum's webinar, If They Can Live Anywhere, Why Would It Be Here? I'm Robert Bell. I'm executive director. Yeah, sometimes I'm that, but right now I'm co-founder of the Intelligent Community Forum. And we're very pleased to have you with us today. This is a very interesting topic, and we're going to be getting into many, many different aspects of it. But first, a housekeeping detail, if you will. All attendees during this webinar will be in listen-only mode, but we very much want to involve you and your comments and questions in the discussion. So you can use the chat function in Zoom, which you probably are familiar with, since so many of us are familiar with Zoom, to submit questions and comments, and I will do my best then to work them into our conversation. The recording of this in video format will be made available to all attendees for sharing after this, and we do encourage you to share it with anyone you think will benefit from this content. So onward. For nearly half the population of industrialized nations, the pandemic broke this ironclad rule. And the ironclad rule was that you were going to live somewhere near where you made your living. Perhaps it was an unfortunately long commute, as happens in many places, but nonetheless, it was geographically pretty close. Then in October of 2021, Gallup, the polling organization, reported that 25% of all full-time US employees were working from home all the time. Now, okay, October 2021, still deep into the pandemic, perhaps not surprising. But if you go less than a year forward in time, McKinsey clocked the full-time at-home workers in September of 2022 at 35% of full-time workers. That is working from home remotely. And that's kind of a striking statistic because it's very close to what economists back in 2020 had estimated was the ultimate, possibility. How many people, what percentage of the workforce could actually work from home, work remotely full time? And so, your situation where I think personally, this is just my personal opinion, as companies bow to reality and as they begin reorganizing work to take into account this new technology, I think that percentage of people who could work at home is going to continue to rise. And if that link between where you live and where you work keeps stretching and stretching, the question we're asking today is, can local governments keep trying to attract and retain employers the same old way? Or to put it another way, as we do in the title of this, if you can live anywhere, why would it be here? And that's a question that organizations in economic development and other parts of local government are going to have to start thinking about very, very seriously. So let me just take a moment to tell you a little bit about the Intelligent Community Forum in case you're not familiar with this. Who are we? Well, we are a research, consulting, and training organization. We serve a network of more than 200 cities, counties, and regions around the world. And what do we do? We offer those cities and regions powerful, evidence-based strategies for growing their local economy, for sustaining that growth, and for solving the problems that growth brings, right? So grow, sustain, and solve is basically what we do every day. And we do that in a number of ways. One is through leadership training and economic and community development. And you're seeing some artwork from our Community Accelerator online training session, which we began developing in 2022. And we're just about finished with our last course in this on sustainability. We also do this through research, analytics, and consulting on community potential and progress, which we've been doing for more than 20 years, resulting in reports, resulting in assessments, resulting in analyses of how communities are doing and really what they should be doing next to step forward in this world. And finally, we do it through conferences naturally, and also through an international awards program, which is probably in some way how many of you have met us for the first time. And the overriding goal of those things is to bring people together and to get communities engaged in partnership with each other so that they can seize global opportunities together. And in October of 2023, you're going to have an opportunity to see us in action in New York City. We're back in New York at our Global Summit, October 25 and 26. So we're certainly looking forward to that. To finish, I've been using this term intelligent community. It's in our name, Intelligent Community Forum. You have to naturally ask the question, well, what is this thing that's an intelligent community? And it is a reaction, a response to the fact that we live in a world and we make a living in that world. We are economic beings as well. And that world is utterly dominated by digital today in so many ways. And you don't have to spend very much time thinking of examples before they become almost too many to count. Intelligent communities, in response to that domination of digital, work across 6 factors to create innovative and growing economies. And they are growing because they're innovative. That's become the number one way to grow your economy, unless you happen to be sitting on a lot of a natural resource. They work to develop an inclusive society, and by that we mean mostly we mean economically inclusive, right? I mean digital diversity, equity, and inclusion obviously are extremely important, but if you don't have economic inclusion, you really don't have very much of the others either. So economic inclusion is extremely important. And finally, to help them develop an affirming culture, a culture that says yes to possibility, that says, yes, we can do that. Let's give that a try. And a culture that is open to the world, because so much of the economic opportunity available to us now in this globalized economy is going to come from outside of the bounds of our community. And so these 3 things, none of which sound very technical, if you will, are all powered by tapping the enormous potential of technology for the good of the community. Right? The smart city movement is all about tapping the power of technology to make the city run a bit better, which is a valuable thing. We're interested in tapping that same enormous potential to create that innovative and growing economy, that economic inclusion, that affirming culture that is open to the world. So that, in the shortest form I can come up with, is what an intelligent community is. I want to kick off today by taking you back to October of this year in our summit in Dublin, Ohio, which is a small city on the outskirts of the sort of the metropolitan area that is formed by Columbus, Ohio. And there, one of the speakers we're going to hear from today said something that really got our attention. Listen to this.
In America now, we know that 40% of our workforce has a job that could conceivably allow them to work from anywhere. Okay, so that's 40% of the nation. So every city, government, geopolitical unit, or whatever now needs to answer, in my mind, the following question for each individual that is eligible to do that. And the question would be, if I could live from anywhere, why would it be here?
Yes, indeed. And that was Jim Stifler, whom we're going to hear from in just a moment. He didn't speak about this specifically, but to me, it made me think of this book, The Death of Distance. This was written back in 1997, which seems like a very long time ago now, by Frances Cairncross, who works for The Economist, and it was a bestseller. And in this book, she confidently predicted that this internet, which was now beginning to become a broadband internet for users, just beginning, very early stages, was going to have a huge impact and a huge positive impact on the economy. And that impact was going to be to spread economic opportunity farther and wider, because again, distance ceases to matter so much. You don't necessarily have to gather together in big conglomerations called cities in order to get your hands on opportunity. It can come to you from many, many different sources all around the world. And what's interesting about this book is how incredibly wrong she seemed to be. Incredibly wrong, because what did we get instead? We got this huge concentration of talent, of population, of economic opportunity, of investment in a limited number of technology hubs like Silicon Valley, New York, Atlanta, Boston, Chicago in the United States, Toronto, Vancouver in Canada, and the list goes on and on. So was she did she just completely misinterpret what was going to happen? I don't think so, and I think the evidence is that she didn't. All she was like most good prophets, ahead of her time. Because since 1997, while hardly even knowing it, we have been building the foundations of a distributed economy. Exactly what Frances was writing about back in 1997. So for instance, working from home, right? It's been done by some people, a small number of people, for a fairly long time. Once we had broadband, good broadband in our homes, COVID came along and was transformative, obviously. And you saw those statistics about how many people are now doing it. Well, along with work from home comes entertainment at home, right? You used to always have to go someplace to be entertained. Now the world's entertainment flows in a flood into your home, limited entirely by how many services you can afford to subscribe to or want to subscribe to. It's really been completely remarkable. We're talking about virtual companies. Now, again, those have been around for a good long time. The idea that we don't actually all have to gather in an office together. We can interact virtually with our employees, our employers, with our vendors, with our customers. And this, again, was a small but interesting phenomenon for a while until COVID happened. And so in COVID, I remember last year visiting remotely a community that was in our award program, and one of the entrepreneurs there saying, yeah, we just closed our Series B round, and I never actually met any of the investors. I never actually sat in the same room and shared any oxygen with them. We just did it virtually. Along with that comes crowdsourcing, which is, if you will, a sort of a public way of doing the same thing. And who would have expected this? Crowdsourcing, the idea that you can go online, you can set up a project or a program, you can solicit funds, and you'll get either nothing, which I certainly have experience with, or tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars, depending upon what it is you're trying to do. That's quite amazing. E-commerce, of course, right? I mean, we used to have to go to the store to get what we wanted. Now the store comes to our door in the form of a cardboard box. And it's been, again, it was for a very long time hardly a rounding error in retailing, and then exploded during the pandemic, and has settled back a little bit to a more normal curve, but is going to keep growing and growing and growing. And along with e-commerce comes the enormous expansion of warehousing. Right? Because warehousing is the new store. It's where those goods wait before they get to your front porch or your mailbox. And that is the growth of warehouses is balanced by sharp and continuing declines in retail employment, for just the obvious reason that, heck, I don't know how the last time was that I went shopping in a store for anything other than food or to my pharmacy. All of this is made possible by cloud services, that background that is how Netflix is distributed to you, and how Amazon runs, and all these other services run on somebody else's server capacity somewhere out there. We've called it the cloud. We don't need to know where it is because it's online, and it has been transformative. It's basically almost all of the information technology economy is moving into this for economic reasons, and it's powering huge amounts of distribution. And along with that, one of the things that runs on those cloud services is telemedicine. Again, something that had been around for a very long time, but when we got into the pandemic, we figured out how to use it. Right? We figured out how to use it to work with patients in appropriate ways, to help them understand, help diagnose, to help triage what was really important and what needed to be just dealt with in a different way. So huge impacts that we have gradually been building over the last 20 years to form what Francis Cairncross was talking about a very long time ago, the distributed economy. And this has a powerful impact that we at ICF believe very strongly, because it creates a completely new opportunity in on the face of the earth. It creates a chance, literally, for communities everywhere to build dynamic local economies, to build those strong societies and those rich cultures that offer them a sustainable future. With one caveat, they have to know how, because it doesn't just happen by itself. It takes a lot of strategy, it takes a lot of hard work. And we're next going to talk to a couple of people who absolutely know how and can tell us a great deal about how it gets done. So we're going to start for a moment with our first speaker, but before we do that, I want to just introduce you to a little city that can, Hudson, Ohio.
Hudson is welcoming.
Hudson is historic.
Hudson is forward-thinking.
Hudson is intelligent.
People who choose Hudson are looking for a place to raise a family and also be able to work and have full-time fulfilling careers.
Hudson takes a lot of steps to attract innovators and entrepreneurs to the community. Burton D. Morgan Foundation is focused on entrepreneurship. I think our city is also very, very active through its economic development initiatives.
Hudson is a place that seems to attract people who are bright, who are intelligent, who are creative, and I like being a part of that.
We chose Hudson because of its uniqueness. It's historic, yet it's innovative. It's got great education.
This is our self-consumption.
We wanted to do solar, and Hudson worked with us very easily on that so that we could have an on-grid system and had broadband access.
Broadband is what we have to lay for the future. That power is needed to be able to do what you may need in your business: computerization, digitization, transformation, or even healthcare, telemedicine, to be able to seek a doctor's visit directly from your home. Broadband makes all of that possible.
The fourth industrial revolution is something that's happening now. It's changing the future of work. And so it's very important that we are preparing not only our students, but our community to be lifelong learners.
70% of the Hudson residents 25 or older have a college degree or more.
We're teaching our children that learning isn't an end game. It is always going through, and that means a new idea for a business, that means a new idea for a park, and these new ideas are what our economy and our region thrive on.
You're looking at innovative strategies that allow us to attract businesses, creating a safe neighborhood program, a downtown that's vibrant. The final piece of it is also creating a digital strategy that allows them to stay connected to the world. And Hudson has all of that, and that is why Hudson was recognized as a top intelligent community.
Being an intelligent community really brands us.
Our entire region is really in the process of reinventing itself, and I think Hudson is right in the middle of all of that. It's very proximate to the city of Cleveland, also to the city of Akron, and so the people who live and work here have influences in those large metropolitan areas in our region.
We can walk downtown and enjoy a picnic on the green and dinner with our children and have these fulfilling careers. And it is a vision for Hudson of what Hudson can be in every aspect of life.
How about if I unmute?
Everyone.
I want to, if I unmute, it'll work better. So it is my pleasure to introduce Jim Stifler, Chief Economic Officer, who just recently retired in Hudson, Ohio. And Jim, let's turn this over to you. Let's unshare the screen so we can see our faces and step forward.
Okay. Well, thank you. That's the first time I've seen RET in parentheses after my name. So I thought that accommodation was only made for generals and admirals.
You're a general and an admiral to me, buddy.
So good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining. I'm excited to be here and to be alongside Robert and Philly this morning. So that is who Hudson is. It's who we've been. But is it enough going forward? The last 3 years, in my mind, brought about 15 or so years of change, I think. And I think we're just beginning to contemplate and understand what that change means. And, it led me to the comment I made in Columbus, which is if an individual can live anywhere, why would they live here? I mean, it's always been a good measure. If you look at, a whole growth strategy like the ICF has taught us to do, and the 6 factors that determine such outcomes, you always want vibrant population growth and involved residents and innovation. But as I look at the job I had for the last 6.5 years, my job was to tend to today, but grow and ensure our future. And, cities change slowly, 10, 20, 30 years to affect big changes like housing and zoning and things like that. In Ohio, we also had a different motivation. Ohio has a municipal income tax. You pay income tax where you work, not where you live. And suddenly, where you work and live is probably even more commonplace. So income tax funds our city, not really sales tax, not really property taxes. And in the last year alone, as people have emerged from a 3-year period or a 3-year hiatus, a 300-year flood, as I call it, we've noticed a couple things. 2 or 3 of our top taxpayers now, businesses do not have a brick or mortar piece in the entire city. Okay. It's just the fact that people are living and working here now, even part-time from their workforce. The other thing we've noticed is we're kind of a future-friendly business community. All of our stuff here is technology, it's innovation, it's cyber, it's homeland, it's stuff that's on trend for the next 20, maybe even 30 years. But our legacy businesses, manufacturers in our case, are roaring back up the tax tables because they have to come to work to do their work. And everybody else is sending people home 2 or 3 days a week, 1 to 3 days a week, I guess. And again, in Ohio, if you go home for 1 or 2 days a week, your income tax now goes to where you're living and working. So I think that gets to the point of the topic today, which is how are you going to react to that? Okay. I looked at my 3 sons, they're 25 to 32. I looked at all their friends during all of this. I sat in my basement and helped run a city, but I watched what young people were doing. I like to say work from anywhere over work from home because they didn't choose where they wanted to work. They chose where they wanted to live and then said, we'll figure out the work part when we get there. And what did they choose? They chose fun, they chose energy, they chose recreation, they chose outdoors, they chose healthy, they chose politics, they chose environment. And many of them haven't come back. So, when you look at what your community has to offer, not everybody has an ocean, not everybody has a mountain range, not everyone has a climate. You look at what the ICF espouses. I remember talking to one of the great communities in Canada who was recognized by the ICF 7 or 8 times. And I said to them, and they were never the community of the year. They were always in the top 7. I said, does that bother you? They said, no. We learn something about ourselves every year, and the ICF just helps us sharpen the saw. So I think it's time to take those 6 success factors and say, how do we apply them now to not just corporations and large tax bases we want to move into our communities, but individuals? And I'll close my preliminary comments by just saying, yesterday, what did I sell? What ingredients went into the attract the business cake, if you will? Well, certainly location and proximity. In Cleveland, outside Cleveland's healthcare. We've got the Cleveland Clinic here. So it's just a raging healthcare center. We have wonderful schools here, some of the best in the state. We've got 220 years of history. We're charming and cute. We've got basic incentives and we have quality of life. No one thinks of Ohio and quality of life in the same sentence, but they're starting to now because of the impact of the last 3 years. Tomorrow, what would the ingredients in the cake be? Not just for business, but for the individual? Well, one thing that's on my mind could be water. We have 25% of the world's fresh water supply on our doorstep here in the Great Lakes. And you can't go more than a couple hours without hearing about a water crisis somewhere. Recreation. Boy, these kids chose recreation, and they chose recreation in a big way. So they're the next generation. Their kids are going to be 2 generations out. Fiber optic, or at a bare minimum, high quality, higher speed internet. ESG, environment, social governance. These things are being politicized right now, but your next generation really wants to see these things. I'm watching kids take less pay to go to work for a company that is environmentally aware right now or has 500 solar panels on their roof. So that's going to make a difference. And then the quality of life. And in the last 3 years, just in Hudson, we've added more trails, more bike lanes, all leading to downtown from each direction on the compass, a pickleball complex, a skateboard park, a splash pad, all things that might lead people to say, hey, I can live and work here. So as communities around the world, I'd encourage you, this is your time to really think about it. It's your time to double down. The one thing I learned in the business world was when things got tough, the strongest companies doubled down. They amplified their advantages. And coming out of this, that's what I would encourage each of you to do. Thanks.
Jim, thank you. Thank you. Yes, double down. That's Cisco is one of the most famous examples. They invested through a downturn and came out twice the size they were before. Why on earth does nobody think of Ohio and quality of life in the same sentence? I've been there. I've been there several times now.
Well, most people, when they come here, they say, where's the rust? I thought there was rust.
Well, there may be some rust. If I had to sum up what you just shared with us, and we'll talk about this more with our other speaker at the end, but you're basically saying that what has always mattered in economic development still matters, but as we roll into this future, some of the traditional things are going to matter a lot less, and some of the things that we've thought of as just being nice to haves perhaps are going to become critical path. I mean, am I getting that right?
I think so. I think so, because, even if you're a traditional economic developer wooing big companies and not just individuals, I've noticed my role has allowed me, with this kind of thinking in my mind, to show companies how to woo employees, because there's a real war for talent going on right now. And, we can write off some of the stuff that's making news today, inclusivity, and throw it at the feet of politics and so forth. But the young kids that are going to come to work for your company, they're going to notice that. They're going to notice that you're environmentally aware. They're going to notice that your fleet is electric and that you've got 500 panels on your roof. So you can talk to your traditional businesses that already exist and say, hey, you can pick up your game, It's a lot more than a paycheck that draws these people today.
It's very, very interesting. So a way in which we can help our employers is by making this a better place to live. I mean, I guess we sort of knew that, but again, it's a question of emphasis. It's what has become most important.
When the boys come home, they chastise me constantly for the things we have in our home.
Well, yeah, that's their job. Their job is to chastise.
Yep.
Their parents. They're supposed to. Mine are usually too polite, but I encourage them. We're going to pass on and come back and spend some more time with you toward the end of this. But before we do, I want to introduce you to another place. We'll have to bring our slides back on and introduce you to a place you may not have heard of called Grey County in the province of Ontario in Canada. Okay, apparently I just can't remember to unmute. It's my pleasure to introduce you to Philly Markowitz, who is the Economic Development Officer for Grey County, Ontario. Philly, first of all, I want to present you with or the video, I should say, with my Canada Courage Award for being willing to admit that it occasionally snows there.
Not only does it occasionally snow, but I was in the helicopter when we did some of those overhead shots, because some of that footage is from prior to when drones had really good resolution. And we were up there in -15°C before wind chill, freezing our butts off. And also that surfer at the end, that's not me, but I've recently taken up winter swimming. And sometimes my entry into Georgian Bay requires me pushing big chunks of ice out of the way so I can go for a swim. So not only does it snow, but we actually embrace it.
Yes, exactly. Well, I'm sure that other members of our viewers were shivering vicariously for the gentleman in the surfing
Yes.
in the ice. So anyway, I'm going to stop talking, and we want to hear from you about Grey County and this answer to, if you could live anywhere, why would it be there?
Great. Thank you so much for the invitation. I am going to share my screen because I do have a presentation, which, there we go. Is everyone seeing that now?
Good to go.
Okay, excellent. So to answer your question, what I would like to do is just give you a brief background on the area, where we were, what changed during the pandemic, very much what Jim was addressing. We built for what we thought we knew and where we thought we were going and where we hoped to be. And then things got upended. And now we are both embracing the change and we are reacting to the unexpected challenges and opportunities. So just for context, this is where Grey County is. We are also on the Great Lakes, nestled in here between Lake Huron and Georgian Bay, which is the east side of Lake Huron. We are northwest of Toronto, and I'll talk more about the community in a bit. First, though, a little bit about me. This is me at, I think, 28. This photo was taken in 1993. I moved to Grey County about a year and a half before then, and I was drawn by what I saw at the time as a real frontier energy. I saw Grey County as a place where people who wanted to get out of the giant suck of the urban commuter shed of the greater Toronto area were attracted to. There was entrepreneurial spirit. There was beautiful landscape that both supported farming, but also in some areas was terrible for farming, and that meant great recreation. So whether that was skiing or hiking, et cetera, et cetera. And also relatively affordable real estate. I was an early adopter of work from home. I started telecommuting, because that's what we called it back in the day, for CBC Radio, CBC being Canada's national broadcaster, back in 1992. I worked from home. Every second week, I would go to the city for one day to take advantage of the studio, so the technology and the staff, and to put my face in front of management, because I recognized that there was no other way to keep my face forward with them at the time, because we weren't online. In fact, we were so not online that I was doing my research and doing the preparation for my program on dial-up, on a modem, on a trunk line that still served people who were on party lines. A lot has changed since then. Briefly, one of the reasons that I wanted to move to the countryside and to Grey County in particular is I saw an opportunity to work less, to live in a way that I could afford, that I simply couldn't if I was working in the city, and to be able to contribute to shaping my community. So it really was about working to live, not living to work. So back to the community attributes. We are 2 to 3 hours from Toronto, depending on where you're heading in the county. Our population, 100,000, spread across a very large landmass. Our largest urban center has 25,000 people. That's the city of Owen Sound, where I am right now. We have a strong history traditionally in manufacturing and in farming, and those things will always need bodies. As Jim said, you will always need to live where you work in those industries. We're also known as a four-season tourism destination because of our landscape. We have the Blue Mountains, we have Georgian Bay, and we have the Bruce Trail and the Niagara Escarpment biosphere. And as Robert said, we've got real winter, and we lean into real winter. So these were all the ways that Grey County was perceived prior to the pandemic. These were things that made Grey County attractive as a vacation destination, attractive as a place that people dreamt about retiring to when they were still working for others and working in offices. And that all changed during the pandemic. We had a huge lifestyle migration, big uptick in people moving to the area and continuing to work for others from home. We estimate that we've had about a 7% increase in population. It is probably more. Our census was taken halfway into the pandemic, and we certainly see the pressure on housing, and we see more people coming into the community all the time. Now, some of these folks are still working for others. Others have given up their conventional office jobs to start home-based businesses. Some have moved here, and this to me is the most interesting thing. They've kept their traditional job for their employer. They're working for their office, but they've started their side hustles with the time that they previously would have spent commuting. They are now doing things like moving to a farm and starting their dream of having a lavender farm or a weekend retreat center or raising sheep. So not only are they contributing their expertise in the way they always have, but they're contributing to the local economy and improving their own lifestyle. Many of the people who moved to the community are younger. They're bringing their knowledge, their energy, their skills. They're bringing their kids. Those kids are going into our schools. And other newcomers to the community have cashed out. They've retired early. They're bringing their time, their willingness to volunteer, and their money. And this has created vibrancy, this has created diversity, and it also has created stressors for the community because there's pressure on affordable housing. Our housing costs have almost doubled over the pandemic, and we are working as a county to address this, along with scarcity in transportation and childcare. And we are working to create a YIMBY culture, yes, in my backyard. This influx of money and people doesn't mean a thing if the community feels fragmented. We can't simply say we've got amenities and we've got supports that include the whole community unless we can prove it. So in our work in economic development, we need to bring sensitivity to not just financial tensions, but cultural tensions between ex-urbanite and rural residents, and the relative wealth of the ex-urbanites who've moved here and the impacts on housing, downtown business mix, things like this. And having strong, welcoming communities, structures in place is vitally important right now. Some of the tensions that have been created by the change in the community have been offset in part by gains in the kind of leisure time that facilitates newcomers to have more community participation and volunteerism. As Jim mentioned, in Hudson, they had been preparing in ways that were consistent with traditional economic development for a long time, by anticipating, by working on business retention and expansion, by growing education and amenities. And we are also invested in those things through youth and newcomer retention and CIPs and incentives and supports and things like that. But we also are recognizing that people's pre-pandemic and post-pandemic motivations for living here have changed. Briefly, I'm going to give you the example of the person in this photograph. He moved pre-pandemic. He came for lifestyle. He's a rock climbing instructor, loves to fly fish, and got work at a local winery, creating apple cider. He has since started a family and been elected to local municipal council. So he came for the lifestyle, and he is contributing to the community. And there are a number of stories like that. So I want to race through because I'm actually more interested in answering the questions and having the conversation. So I am going to end this share and jump into the questions with Robert. Thanks for your time.
Excellent, thank you. And Jim, please join us. So thank you, Philly. That was really, really interesting. And I love the contrast between these two communities that we're talking about here. I want to ask you, because it's a question that basically Jim has already begun to talk about, but so today, post-COVID, still transitioning, what now are the infrastructure, the amenities, the culture that we need in our communities, and what can economic development as a function of local government do to push those forward? And
Sure.
Philly, let's start with you.
So I can certainly talk about what we need in Grey County, and I can extrapolate that to a certain extent across other rural communities in Ontario, which are experiencing similar challenges and opportunities. Housing is our number one concern right now. And for a number of reasons. People who left the city because they did not want to work from home from a 450 square foot condo, or they didn't want to work from home in the suburbs, anticipating that they would not go back to their downtown office. And they're sitting in a 3,000 square foot house in the suburbs where they have to drive to absolutely everything. They're choosing to move here where there's more space, there's more nature, there's more opportunity for lifestyle, but they're being squeezed in the housing market, and local residents who were here prior are also being squeezed in the local housing market. What we also need to build is transportation networks, because many newcomers are coming without vehicles, and certainly those who are coming and working in the sectors with lower rates of pay are finding tension between affordability of housing and maintaining a vehicle. So public transit is something that we need to invest in. Childcare is something we need to invest in, and we are investing in, because we are attracting new families, and things that support cultural diversity and cultural sensitivity as well, because a number of the newcomers to the area are recent immigrants, and they are coming as highly skilled employees who are being attracted mostly because we are close to Bruce Power, and there is a massive need for skilled labor there with that 30-year program, and people are coming from all around the world. So that's just some, and it goes without saying that broadband is the thing that facilitates all of these things.
Goes without saying, but it's not always there. Jim, how about you? In terms of, what you talked about this a little bit, but what's the new infrastructure, amenities, culture that we need, and what can, as an economic developer, do about that?
Well, first of all, let me say I appreciated Philly's answers, and housing is one of the biggest challenges we face too. I look at, again, the future. If Grey County is a painting on the wall in a museum, we got to care for it. Keep it restored, keep it current, but we've got to embellish it for future generations, and we need to think about housing differently. There's a great article in the New York Times on Sunday about the huge and growing number of people over age 50 who are living alone in America, and most of them are stuck in homes that are too big for them. They need to monetize the home in order to retire, but there's no option. So again, housing, I'm an economic developer, but I think housing and economic development are inextricably linked. Fiber, simply put, fibered communities win. It's that simple. And you think about, okay, the premise of today's dialogue. If I could work anywhere, why would it be from here? Okay, my kids are virtually digital natives. Their kids will be digital natives. They've never known a telephone. They've only known the internet. Why would you work, or could you work from anywhere if you did not have good internet? Cities that don't have it, and you can stop short of fiber. We don't have it to the home yet. We have it to 500 businesses here in our town. But inside my house, I'm getting about 300 megabits a second. So that's better than most of America, non-fiber. But you've got to have that. And then I think you have to embrace your natural attributes. The Cuyahoga Valley National Park, yes, there is a national park in Ohio. People ask me that question a lot. Is a few hundred yards outside our border. There's actually a slice of another city between us and the park, but we claim it like it's our own, and to attract the individual, that is a huge asset. It's in the top 10 most visited national parks in America. And part of it's there's a 120-mile long bike trail that goes right through it. So you've got to embrace what's nearby. You have to invest in things that are going to attract people. Everyone laughs at pickleball, but we know how big it's become. We just opened 12 pickleball courts and 6 new tennis courts. And, we're on the verge already of needing crowd control down there, and people want to know if we're going to have a czar of pickleball just to dole out courts.
I think you should.
The answer is no. So, those things I think are, in addition to what Philly said, are key. Fiber communities win. You've got to find your way to fiber. We've found it for our businesses, and now we're looking at taking it to every home. And with the nature of infrastructure investing, which is evolving rapidly, it started with toll roads and bridges and parking systems and things like that. Big money, private investment is coming to fiber now too. And we're looking at alternatives for bringing fiber to each one of our 8,000 homes right now. So
one of my favorite players in that area is a small company called Lit Communities that does all of its projects in partnership. It does public-private projects. That's their business model, as opposed to we're going to build a network for you. Good luck.
Yeah, they're one of the great examples of very well-known private investors who are in this game for the long haul.
Let's, and by the way, I really appreciate your comment about natural attributes. One of the things that we perennially say to communities, not just nature, but natural attributes is, before you get all excited about building a nanotechnology cluster, why don't you just stop for a moment and think about what you've got that can adapt and respond.
I couldn't agree more. And one of the things that I've noticed is a lot of the people who've moved to the area who used to come as kids when they were vacationing or as adults is they are leaning into our natural attributes because they're seeing them with fresh eyes. They have the zeal of the recent convert, and they are now making up the bulk of a lot of the volunteerism, the fundraising, the maintenance, so on Bruce Trail and things like that. So it's really important for us to actually see what we have through fresh eyes, because it's easy to take what we have for granted and not see how truly wonderful it is through the eyes of a newcomer.
Let's talk about the, sort of the focus of attention for any locality is its downtown, right? So we have got a lot of other stuff, but sooner or later we have a core somewhere. Remote work is really stressing downtowns. I live outside of New York City, and Manhattan's Central Business District is just, this real estate community is beginning to come to grips with the idea that, guess what? Fewer and fewer people are going to be coming in here. And it's really put tremendous stresses on all the vendors who serve it, and on and on and on. There's another side of this, of course, when you're dealing with much smaller places. And so I guess what I want to ask is, how do you think our basic idea of this central business district needs to evolve?
So I would really like to speak to this because there is a very big difference between larger urban centers and smaller urban centers. And in larger urban centers, we had the concentration of workers around one particular industry silo, let's say finance. And people were traditionally coming in Monday through Friday and having lunch out and taking their dry cleaning somewhere and picking up some shopping on the way home. There was a lot of money spread around the small businesses that served those office towers. That has gone away. I just heard a term for it this weekend. I happened to turn on the radio and hear an interview about how the small businesses in larger urban centers are suffering and how many businesses have gone to a model where people are working from home Monday and Friday, but still coming in the middle of the week. And the businesses are trying to survive on 3 days instead of 5. And the people who are coming in on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday have been given a rather lively acronym: Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. You can do it in your own head. And the businesses are suffering. We're not seeing that here. Our largest community is 25,000 people, and we consider an urban center anything above 5,000. And we are seeing in our mid-size rural urban communities a big revitalization of the downtown. And I believe the reason is people who've come out of the city because they didn't want to have their office on their bed and have invested in a house. Maybe they have a little office in their home, but it's not a place where they're having meetings. It's easy for them to come downtown. It's a 7-minute walk for me when I'm working from home to go to a cafe and meet someone, to have a meeting. And for others, it might be a 15 or 20-minute drive to come into an urban center, but it's not battling traffic. It's not on overcrowded public transit. There's not 20 minutes of looking for parking. So, and they want the social connection. So we're actually seeing new businesses. We're seeing more people on the street, and we're seeing more people engage in those local businesses and then do a little side shopping while they are there. Now, that's not everywhere, but it's definitely happening. We are seeing more spaces filled after the pandemic than before the pandemic. We're seeing our downtowns becoming more vibrant.
That's terrific. Now, Jim, just to set the context in this, I mean, Hudson is, it isn't, but it could easily just be a bedroom community to Columbus. I mean, you're part of that Columbus metro. And
Cleveland Metro.
Oh, really? You've considered yourself that far away, huh, from Columbus? How about that?
Yeah,
Okay.
we're 2 hours from Columbus. Yeah,
Wow.
we're 30 minutes from Cleveland, 20 minutes from Akron.
I haven't been to your community in so long. Okay, and so my bad. But in any case, that's been kind of the economic driver for you, and now we're talking about a very different world where your central business district now is achieving new needs. So what are you seeing?
Well, during the pandemic, we kept track of any business that went somewhere for any reason that was at street level in one of 5 areas. So, it could have just been the proprietors retired, they got tired, the game changed. It wasn't necessarily a victim of the pandemic, but we saw 2 to 3, sometimes 4 bidders for every space that came open during the pandemic. I think what we're witnessing is not just the effects of the pandemic, but the battle with the online world. And in a small community, the businesses that complement the web, as opposed to butt heads with it, are going to be the ones that need to live at street level, because it's clear. I mean, you said it yourself, you don't go out for very much anymore. So we're seeing a transformation that goes beyond the pandemic there. But I'm with Philly. Just because you can work from anywhere doesn't mean you want to spend 40, 50 hours a week in your second bedroom. You need collaborative spaces. You need places to convene. I like to call them collaboratories. You need street level offices, even if you just use them for a little while. Cleveland commercial brokers told me the other day that most of the office absorption in downtown Cleveland now is going to apartments. I think that's going to be a tougher thing to do in a small town like Hudson, but we need to get on trend businesses relative to the online world in our street level, and then we need collaborative spaces. People still want to see each other. They don't want to drive 35 miles to see each other every day now. So
I think it's interesting. I remember we used to have an office down in the Wall Street area, and it went through the whole 9/11 thing, and Wall Street finance companies just began to scatter so that they could be safer, basically. And I was just stunned in the years between when we moved in and when we moved out, watching that neighborhood suddenly change. First time I noticed it was when I saw a gentleman out walking his dog at 5 or 6 o'clock at night, and I thought, "What's that about?" And then I realized, oh, he lives here. And so there was this huge change just in that particular area. We're running out of time, but I just want to ask you both a final question. Most economists think in the U.S., at least, that about 36% of jobs can be done remotely. I tend to think that percentage is going to change. Do you think that's going to grow, and if why or why not? So, Jim, let's start with you.
I think it's going to grow. I don't think, well, first of all, we were headed towards a nation that was going to be, by many accounts, a service economy. Now you're seeing reshoring because of the broken supply chains and the interruption and political strife and things like that. So on one hand, some of this manufacturing and some of the things that were offshore could come back to the United States. And as we said, those kinds of jobs need to show up each day to perform or create. That said, I think away from that, you have, Philly and I see a broad spectrum of CEOs every day. They're still struggling with what the new template looks like. And they're telling people now you get a 4-in-1 or a 3-in-2. But I also think CEOs talk out of both sides of their mouth because they want to create culture. They want to see people in the office. But the savings from shrinking the footprint and putting 1.5 to 2 fannies in each seat, as opposed to an office per person or a cube per person, it goes right to the bottom line. I also think that employers will say hard and fast, let's commit a permanent percentage of our workforce to remote, because that will help them attract the very specific individual who wants that. And then in the middle range, you'll have your 3-in-1s or your 4-in-1s, 1 day in, 2 days in, or 2 days out, whatever. And then you're going to have the people that just know what they need to do and where they need to be to do it. And that's largely your upper managers. So I think it's not going to go back to where it was, in my opinion. It's going to grow. We've proven that you can run companies and cities, from disparate locations. So.
Excellent. Philly, last word to you. Remote work, where's that going?
Yeah, there's little I can add. Even at the county, we recognize that retaining good talent it is more important than letting someone go just because they want to move. We've had someone move to Yukon recently, next to Alaska, and they're wonderful, and we're keeping them because they do their job and we want them, and they're still connected to our community, even if they're living away. I do believe that we're going to see more. I think we're going to see the adoption of robotics and mechanization in sectors that we haven't seen those technologies traditionally. Hospitality, specifically in faster foods, possibly in hotel hospitality as well. And that's going to create more jobs where people are going to be servicing the technology, but they aren't going to be working in a specific location. So I imagine that adoption coming because people are not returning to those industries, but consumers still want those services. So we're struggling there. So I see that opportunity. I also see the reshoring. There are things that we're going to see because of climate change. We haven't even talked about climate yet, but specifically around specific food crops and possibly textile crops. There are things that are going to have to come back to North America because we have water and other places don't. And those are going to bring people back, and they're also going to bring the people who service those, who again can live anywhere as long as they can maintain their service area.
Great answers. Thank you. I wish we could keep going, but the time has been called. I want to thank Jim Stifler, who's the recently retired Chief Economic Officer of the City of Hudson, and Philly Markowitz, who is not the recently retired Economic Development Officer from the County of Gray, for sharing your insights with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you for the opportunity. This was a great hour.
We're going to wrap this up. Yeah, thank you very much. Oh, by the way, the gentleman who's running this show actually is in Florida, where I'm in New Jersey. So if you can go to your next slide there, just very briefly, coming up for ICF. Coming up next on January 16th, we're going to publish the 7th and final course in our online educational program, the Community Accelerator. It's going to be about sustainability and all the economic and cultural impacts that it can have. Coming later in January, we're going to be launching a completely new product or service. We're going to begin to certify intelligent communities based upon this methodology we've developed for our award program, but it's going to become an economic development tool for communities that I think we'll be able to make excellent use of. Then just a day later, We will be having the deadline for our awards program. The questionnaires for our selection of the Smart 21 of 2023 will be due on that day if they're not there before. So if you've got one of those and you want to apply, keep that date in mind. And then finally, on February 23rd, we're going to be announcing that Smart 21 in an online conference called Turning Connectivity into Growth, How Intelligent Communities Use Broadband to Grow Their Economies. So that's always an interesting topic. We're going to be talking specifically about, again, how do you change bits into coins? Because it's not as obvious as it may seem. So that brings us to the end. Thank you very much for joining us. As I said earlier, there will be a recording of this will be available, and you'll be free to share it with others. And thank you. Remember, as we like to say at ICF, there really is no place like home.